This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. You trudge into town with your boots caked in dust and your senses peeled for trouble, but something feels off. The saloon's doors creak like they're whispering secrets. The sheriff's office has its windows blacked out in the middle of the day. And every man who passes you keeps their hat low and their voice lower. You don't hear laughter, just the wind dragging something across the dirt, maybe a tumbleweed. Or maybe a boot with no foot inside it. Either way, you're not sure you want to know. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's see who's braving the night with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't notice him at first. He's leaning against the telegraph post, half in shadow, half in legend. The tin star on his chest glints once, just once, before fading back into tarnish. The name on the badge is rubbed nearly smooth, like it's been through fire. But everyone in this dusty border town knows exactly who it belongs to. They call him the Law, but only because criminal doesn't look as nice stitched on a uniform. His eyes don't scan you, they measure you. Every inch of you from hat brim to heel. The way a butcher inspects livestock. You'd heard stories. Who hasn't? Tales of a man who walked into towns and made them safer, by scaring off anyone who could testify against him. Back when the West was still wild and lawless, every town begged for order. But no one said what kind of order they wanted. And sometimes, well, sometimes the devil enforces peace better than an angel ever could. You hear spurs behind you, slow, deliberate, like someone's counting your heartbeat and waiting for the last one. When you turn, the post is empty, but your gut says he's still watching. Historians still argue whether he was truly deputized in the Arizona territory or if the papers were forged. Either way, his appointment conveniently followed a suspicious fire that destroyed 3 records offices and 1 rather outspoken judge. A coincidence? Sure. Like how every sheriff's horse mysteriously turned up poisoned after he entered the race. You can still see the cracks in the boardwalk where he shot a man for jaywalking before that word was invented. According to old-timers, he claimed the man crossed the road with bad intentions. And because this town feared intentions more than actions, no one questioned it. Your bootsteps echo a little louder than you'd like. You glance down and realize you're walking in someone else's tracks, too wide for your feet. Too deep for recent weather. And they're not going anywhere. Just circling the sheriff's office like a warning carved into the earth. There's an old ledger in the bank vault. Few ever get to see it. But those who do say the first page lists every lawman sworn into service here, and the last entry is in blood. Not ink, blood. One fringe theory even suggests he wasn't just a man. That he was something older, something wearing the skin of justice just convincingly enough to pass for human. But then again, Westerners always did like their ghost stories with a splash of gunpowder. Still, the land remembers. Especially the land out back where the jail used to be. Now it's just a patch of dry weeds and half a gallows beam. You step there once, and feel a breeze from nowhere. You step again, and feel watched. And no one talks about the boot. Not the boot, but his boot. The one they say he left behind the night he disappeared. One boot on the front porch. One at the edge of the well. No body. No goodbye. Just a whisper in the air. Badge stays. Even the U.S. Marshals stopped asking questions after one of their agents mailed in his report, then vanished from his hotel room mid-shave. Razor still humming on the dresser. Coffee still warm. You sit on a bench and watch the sun lower behind the hills, turning the whole town amber. The shadow from the sheriff's office grows longer than it should, stretching past buildings, past alleys, until it nearly brushes your boot. You don't move, because if you've learned anything from this town, it's that moving first is a mistake. Back in the day, they say you walked into a border town where no one had ever seen law. By sundown, He deputized himself, hanged the existing sheriff for past misdeeds, and rewritten the town charter to make all crimes subject to his moral judgment. Moral, of course, being a flexible word, especially when it came with gold under the table. And he never wrote his own name, never signed it, never said it, just left his badge on your desk and said, "I'm what's left after order fails." You glance again at that badge on the telegraph post. This time, it's gone, but the itch in your back teeth, the crawl up your spine, says something else is here now. You don't know it yet, but your story just joined his. You wake with grit in your teeth and the sour taste of iron on your tongue. Not blood, yet, but that metallic warning your body gives when something ain't quite right. The street is still empty. The sun's barely cracked the horizon, casting long, orange fingers across the buildings. But the sheriff's office? Already open, doors slightly ajar, creaking on its hinge like it's exhaling secrets. You stand, brush the dust off your coat, and pretend your hands aren't shaking. They are. Inside, it's colder than it should be. Not just the shade kind of cold, basement cold. And this building doesn't even have a basement. At least, not one that's on any map. Behind the desk sits the badge. No man, no sound. Just the badge on a cracked leather holder, resting beside a half-burned ledger and an empty shot glass. The kind with a chip on the rim, like someone used it for a last toast before drawing a gun. You flip open the ledger, and that's when you find it, his name. Or, a name, scrawled in shaky, uneven letters like it was written during an earthquake. And beneath it, a note in red pencil. First arrest, Elmer Pratt. Crime, knowing too much. You frown. Elmer Pratt was a preacher in this town back in the 1870s. A gentle man, gave away half his flock's tithe to build a schoolhouse that never got built. The rumor? He confronted the sheriff over sins dressed as law. The next day, he was gone. No funeral, no trail. His Bible was found nailed shut to the church door with a Bowie knife. Historians still argue whether Elmer left on his own or met a darker fate. But there's one thing they agree on. The sheriff was never the same afterward. Started wearing darker coats, stopped shaving, grew quieter, like he'd buried a part of himself. Or maybe let something else crawl in. You run your fingers over the next few pages, each entry more cryptic than the last. Most don't have names, just nicknames. The card sharp, Little Lizzie, the lunger in blue. One page just reads, me. Nothing else. And then you see it, a sketch. Charcoal, crude, a man in a wide-brimmed hat holding up a wanted poster. But the face on the poster is his own. Turns out, before he was ever called sheriff, he was already wanted for murder, cattle rustling, mail fraud, and one odd charge, obstruction of rain. That last one must have been a joke. Or a warning. You follow the paper trail deeper. A bounty poster from the New Mexico Territory, dated 3 years before he ever arrived here, offering $1.500 for his capture. Alive only, dead didn't count. Because, apparently, every man who tried to kill him just disappeared. No bodies, no boots, just vanished. Except for one man, Bobby Wren, a gambler with more whiskey than brains. He took a shot at the sheriff from the church bell tower. Missed, and jumped trying to escape. Broke both legs. The sheriff supposedly limped up the bell tower ladder, sat beside Bobby, and read him his own obituary. Out loud, slowly. Bobby died 3 days later. Not from the fall, but from a heart attack. Screaming the sheriff's name over and over. Problem is, no one remembers what he said, or won't repeat it. You step out into the street again. The town's awake now, sort of. People move like they're underwater, heads down, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like prey. No one greets you. No one greets anyone. This is a place where knowing gets you killed faster than doing. And yet, somehow, this man, this criminal, became the symbol of law and order. Mainstream history books gloss over it, of course, They mention his swift justice and firm control. They cite the drop in crime rates. But they never talk about the disappearances. The fact that every newspaper editor within a 100-mile radius either moved east or was buried in a closed casket funeral. They don't mention that he never stood for re-election. Didn't need to. He'd walk into the town hall every spring, drop a single coin on the mayor's desk, and say, "That covers it." No one ever asked what it meant. One quirky record tucked away in a territorial archive suggests he was originally a scout for the Confederate Army. But when asked about his past, he once replied, "The war didn't end, it just changed uniforms." Maybe he believed that. Maybe he was the war. Walking. You wander to the edge of town, where the cactus lean a little too close and the coyotes don't howl, they watch. There's a burned-out house here. No one lives in it. Locals call it the first trial. They say it's where he dragged his first prisoner after becoming sheriff. No courthouse. No jury. Just him, a lantern, and a pair of handcuffs made from melted church bells. And no one left. Even now, the wind won't blow through that lot. It dances around it, like even nature has learned to avoid stepping on this man's shadow. You spot a nail rusted deep into the scorched wood of the doorway. On it hangs a single scrap of leather. Torn, old, but still stitched in faded gold letters, Marshal. He was never a marshal. But maybe he just took it. Like he took everything else. The badge wasn't earned. It was bought. You find the receipt folded behind the mirror in the sheriff's office. Wedged between two cracked floorboards and sealed with wax. It's old, older than the desk it was hidden under. The ink is faded, but the words are legible if you tilt it toward the window just right. One territorial commission minus $45 and 2 mules. Paid in full. Signed by a man whose signature later appeared on 3 missing person reports. So much for justice. The day he got the badge. No one celebrated. There were no parades. No drinks on the house. No cheerful toasts. Just silence. Like the town already knew. Maybe that's why the blacksmith left the next morning. Packed up everything, tools, family, even the bellows, and rode east. His house stayed empty for 40 years. That first week, 3 arrests, 1 trial, all verdicts. Guilty. All punishments. Unrecorded. It's not that he enforced the law, it's that he decided what the law was. And it changed, depending on how he woke up, or what mood the wind was in. Spitting on the street? Fine one day. Hanging offense the next. Looking him in the eye? Best not. There's a story about a farmer named Jarvis Clay. Moved here from Abilene with a wife, 3 kids, and a mule named Samson. Set up a peach orchard just north of town. One night, the sheriff showed up at his fence line, knocked once, and asked for a slice of pie. Next morning, the orchard was on fire. The barn was flattened, and Samson, the mule, was deputized. That's not a joke. The town records list Deputy Samson for a span of 3 days. With no duties assigned, when questioned, the sheriff replied, "He listens better than most folks." Historians still argue whether this was a drunken stunt, a scare tactic, or a message to Clay's widow. But the peach trees never grew back. And it wasn't just justice he sold, it was safety. Business owners started paying peace fees, a few coins under the table, and the sheriff would accidentally forget to inspect your barrels or patrol your gambling room during peak hours. But if you didn't pay, well, accidents happened. Barns caught fire. Wells ran dry. Customers vanished. Sometimes your wife developed a mysterious cough and was never seen again. One quirky fact: he carried 3 pistols, 1 real, 1 with no barrel, and 1 filled with blanks. He'd shuffle them daily. Never tell anyone which was which. Said it kept his aim honest. Once, he pointed the blank-loaded one at a preacher mid-sermon and pulled the trigger, just to make sure the man still feared the Lord. He laughed. No one else did. You wander to the old livery stable. Boards warped, doors half open, the scent of mold and old hay clinging to the shadows. They say he used to sleep here. Not in a room, on the floor. Beside the horses. Said he trusted animals more than men. Maybe he meant they didn't talk. But plenty of people did talk. Whispered behind hands. Dared each other to write anonymous letters. A few even tried reporting him to the circuit judge. But somehow, each of them wound up in jail the night before the judge came through. Charged with nonsense like intentional forgetfulness or eye crimes. One man, Joe Greeley, was jailed for dreaming disrespectfully. He didn't remember the dream, but he never made it back to his house. There's one locked cabinet in the sheriff's office, still rusted shut. Locals say it holds a ledger with names of everyone who ever paid him, betrayed him, or worshipped him. One key, no duplicates. And the key? Worn on a string around his neck. You think about breaking it open, but something holds you back. Not fear, instinct. Because this wasn't a man who built a kingdom of law. He built a marketplace. And the price? Always blood. Yours. Someone else's, it didn't matter. He took gold, secrets, favors. But the blood was the receipt. The one thing he never returned. The strangest part? He wasn't greedy. Not in the usual way. He didn't hoard wealth or build mansions. He didn't buy women. Didn't flaunt power. He just was. Like a fire that didn't care what it burned, just that it kept burning. There's a rusted sign nailed to the gallows beam. No gods. No kings, just consequence. Some say he wrote it. Some say he stole it from an outlaw poet who tried to carve it on a train car before being thrown off at high speed. Either way, the meaning stuck. By the time you walk back into town square, the sun is high, and the badge is gone again. You could have sworn it was just on the post an hour ago. But now, just a scratch on the wood where it hung, and the faint scent of gun oil. You hear someone murmur from inside the tailor's shop. He was the kind of man who made devils ask for advice. You don't ask who said it. You already know. Everyone said it, just not out loud. And that, maybe, is how he stayed in power for so long. Because when justice is bought, and silence is currency, even criminals wear stars. They say you can tell a man's soul by his boots. In this case, you wish that wasn't true. He wore high-heeled cavalry boots with hand-tooled snakeskin trim, left over from a man named McCready who hadn't been seen since '78. McCready had big feet, bigger than the sheriff's. Folks remembered, but the sheriff suddenly started wearing boots just McCready's size. You do the math. And that wasn't the first time. There's a pattern, if you care to look. A trader from El Paso shows up one week, smooth talker. Loud hat, spurs with silver tips. Brags about getting a deal on horses and ammo. He disappears in a card game 2 nights later. The sheriff starts wearing silver-tipped spurs the very next day. He never mentions it, just lets the sound of them echo off the saloon floor like a warning bell. You don't accuse him of theft. That'd be like accusing a fire of being too hot. There's a rumor that once, a man from Missouri tried, claimed the sheriff killed his brother, stole his watch, and wore his coat, confronted him right in the middle of Main Street. Witnesses say the sheriff smiled, just once, tilted his head and said, "Then I guess I'm wearing him well." That man didn't leave town. He just stopped being part of it. Historians still argue whether these stories were local exaggerations or a calculated campaign of fear. But there's too much consistency. Too many objects changing hands posthumously. A pocket knife with initials scratched off. A rifle that used to have notches on the stock, now sanded smooth. A gold tooth suddenly missing from the dentist's jar and reappearing in the sheriff's smile. And always the boots. One fringe story claims the sheriff believed boots carried memory. That if he wore the souls of the dead, he'd inherit their secrets. It's nonsense. Of course, except that he always seemed to know things he shouldn't. Where travelers camped, which ranchers hid silver under their floorboards, who was planning to leave town, and when. No one ever saw him reading letters or opening telegrams. He just knew, like the boots whispered to him in his sleep. You step into the old general store, now boarded up and filled with the smell of spoiled flour and tobacco ghosts. There's a floorboard loose behind the counter. You lift it and find a stack of ledgers, supply lists, names, orders, and one odd page, tucked between them, listing measurements, not items, people, heights, weights, boot sizes, hat circumferences, all dated, all labeled by first name only. You run your finger down the list. They're all dead, or gone, or worse. It wasn't about vanity, it was utility. He took what he could use. And if he couldn't use it, he made sure no one else could either. Even the jail uniforms were stitched with initials that didn't match the inmates. That's because most of them weren't made for inmates. They were leftovers, repurposed. Some say he even wore a vest that once belonged to the town doctor, after the doc got too curious about a few irregular autopsies. No one ever proved anything. That was the trick. He didn't leave bodies, just holes in the population. And yet, paradoxically, crime dropped. Townsfolk started locking their doors not because they feared outlaws, but because they feared being mistaken for one. And that was order. Of a sort. You wander down to the old bridge. The one built in haste after the flood of '79. There's a plank missing, right in the middle. Locals say it's where he made his choices. He'd bring people there at night. No witnesses. Just two men. One would return. The other would drift. One old man claims he saw the sheriff toss something into the water once. Not a body, a hat. A battered one, full of bullet holes, the kind worn by a known rustler. The hat floated downriver, and 2 weeks later, so did a body wearing brand new boots. It was never about trophies. It was about replacement. You begin to suspect he never owned a single original item. Every piece of his wardrobe, every weapon, even his horse, they all once belonged to someone else. People with names, families, plans, until they crossed his line in the sand, and became supplies. The line? Arbitrary. It wasn't drawn in the dirt, it was drawn in him. You didn't see it until you'd already crossed. There's a photograph in the saloon, blurred, grainy, likely staged. It shows the sheriff standing next to 3 men with their faces smudged out. Literally, someone rubbed the image raw. His hand rests on one of their shoulders. The caption reads, "Upholders of the Law 1883. But there's only one badge in the image. And it's upside down. No one knows who took the photo. It showed up one morning. Already nailed to the wall. You return to the sheriff's office. The doors open again. This time, the boots are on the desk. Not worn, displayed. As if to say, you're next. If you fit, you don't go in. Not because of fear. Because of recognition. You realize you've walked a little like him today. Spoken more slowly. Stared a little too long at people's shoes. And that's how it starts. Not with a gunshot. With a fit. You sit outside the saloon. Watching the town breathe like a tired animal. Slow. Shallow. Tense. A tumbleweed crosses the street with more confidence than the townsfolk. No one makes eye contact. No one speaks above a whisper. And every window reflects just enough light to remind you that you're being watched, from somewhere. At first glance, this place looks tamed. No gunfights. No horses charging through storefronts. No drunkards passed out in the alleys. But then again, that's exactly what makes it strange. Because order this absolute doesn't come naturally in the West. It comes from fear. And fear has a name, his. You watch a boy, maybe 12, ride past on a too large mule. The child gives a wide berth to the sheriff's office. Crosses to the other side of the street even though it's slower. You realize something. This isn't a town that respects its lawman. It's a town that avoids his shadow. Back in the day, they say he cleaned up outlaw gangs in under a week. But when people say, cleaned up, they don't mean arrests. They mean disappearances. No trials. No shootouts. Just absence. Ranchers who refused his safety tax suddenly vanished during cattle drives. One saloonkeeper refused to offer him a free room and, mysteriously, his entire building collapsed during a storm. No rain, no thunder, just dust and regret. Historians still argue whether the sheriff was a master tactician or simply lucky, but let's be honest. Luck doesn't leave calling cards in blood on the back of wanted posters. The twisted genius of his rule was that he didn't punish crime, he defined it. 1 month, gambling was legal. The next, it was a crime unless he got 10% of the pot. Shooting someone in self-defense? Sometimes forgivable, sometimes treason. He didn't need laws, he needed moods. You step into the barbershop. Now a dusty relic with scissors rusted shut and the scent of long-dried shaving cream clinging to the walls. A hand-painted sign still hangs in the back, closed Sundays. Except for the sheriff. That tells you everything. Word is, he didn't ask for special treatment, he just expected it. And the town bent under his expectations like trees under wind. Even churches adjusted their sermons to include a prayer for earthly enforcers of divine will. Yes, that's a real quote. It appeared in a printed pamphlet once. The pastor who wrote it left town the next month and was never seen again. Some say he found religion elsewhere. Others say he found the bottom of the mine shaft. One quirky local legend says the sheriff used to test new deputies by handing them a loaded revolver and asking them one question. Would you shoot me if I told you to? Not why, just if. 3 deputies passed. Only one is still buried with a nameplate. You start to realize something darker. The sheriff wanted enemies. Needed them. A town too quiet made him nervous. So when real criminals disappeared, he started making new ones, fabricating charges, twisting words, punishing the innocent until even the guilty were confused. And when there were no more enemies to tame, he turned on the people who built him. One of the town's oldest ledgers shows that he once jailed the mayor, the town banker, and the postmaster, all within a month. Official reason: potential for subversion. Unofficial reason? They had formed a committee to cut his funding. That ended with a rope. 3 ropes. All reused. You walk past the old schoolhouse and notice the plaque above the door has been pried off. No name. Just a faint impression where it used to be. Turns out, the sheriff once dated the schoolteacher. Rumors say she caught him with a traveling actress and threatened to report his affairs, both romantic and financial. The very next week, the school closed. The teacher moved back east. Allegedly. But her letters home never resumed. You pause beside a window and catch your reflection. For a brief moment, the shape you see isn't quite you. Hat tilted too low, mouth too stern, stance too square. You blink and it's gone. Maybe it's the dust. Maybe it's the legacy. Because his legacy is this: towns that obey without knowing why. Streets that stay clean out of instinct, not civic duty. Doors that close just a little too fast at night. Even the animals change. Dogs no longer bark. Cats don't perch on windowsills. Horses walk slower near the sheriff's office. You're not imagining it. They feel the history soaked into those boards. You head toward the town square, where a statue once stood, now torn down. The base blackened from an old fire. The statue wasn't of a hero. It wasn't even of the sheriff. It was a blank figure. Face worn smooth, arms outstretched like scales. Some say it was a tribute to justice. Others say he had it built himself as a mirror. When it burned, no one replaced it, but he never rebuilt it either. Why? Because people feared nothing more than what that statue reminded them of: that justice. Here, didn't wear robes or carry books. It wore snakeskin boots, and it smiled when you begged. You sit on the edge of a weather-worn bench outside the saloon, watching 2 cowboys argue over a hand of poker. Their voices are hushed, eyes darting, like they're more afraid of who might hear than what they're saying. It reminds you of a story, one you overheard back at the livery stable from a man with one eye and no last name. He swore up and down that the sheriff once staged a gunfight so dramatic, so theatrical. Dime novel writers still reprint it with new embellishments every year. Only problem? It never happened. No witnesses. No bullet holes. No bodies. Just the sheriff's word. According to the legend, he squared off against 3 notorious outlaws, Brody, Cale, and Mendez, right here in this very street. Supposedly, all 3 drew on him at once. Supposedly, he gunned them down before their triggers moved. Supposedly, their corpses lay in the dirt for hours, untouched, as townsfolk watched in reverent silence. Supposedly, historians still argue whether the event was fabricated entirely or if there was some kernel of truth buried beneath the layers of myth. The town records from that week are mysteriously missing, and every photo from that month, blurred, literally scratched out or water damaged beyond recognition. It's like history itself refused to confirm the tale. Even stranger, the supposed outlaws in the story? No one ever found their graves. No family came to collect them. No bounty claimed. It's like they never existed. Just inked ghosts propping up a self-made legend. But here's the twist. After that gunfight, the sheriff's popularity soared. Travelers came from other counties to shake his hand. Landowners offered him parcels in gratitude. And someone, somewhere, started calling him the Law west of Mercy Creek. That name stuck. Mercy Creek didn't. The creek dried up 2 years later, leaving behind only bones and whispers. You step into the saloon, where time has been embalmed in dust and cheap whiskey. The piano's still here, keys warped, lid half open. Locals say he played once. Just once. The night after the fictional shootout. He didn't play a tune. Just pressed one key, over and over. Middle C, middle C, middle C. The bartender back then asked if he wanted a drink. The sheriff replied, "I've already taken what I need." No one asked what that was. One quirky rumor says the whole shootout was inspired by a theater play he saw in his youth. Shakespeare, of all things. Hamlet, maybe, or Macbeth. Something tragic. Something where everyone dies but the one pulling the strings. That's who he wanted to be, not just the sheriff. The storyteller. And when you control the story, you don't need truth, you just need belief. So he began curating his own legend. Started dropping phrases like, "No man ever outdrew me," in casual conversation. Posed for tintypes with smoking pistols and steely gazes. He even hired a painter once to create an oil portrait of him standing on a pile of spent bullet casings. It hung in the town hall until someone defaced it with pig's blood. That person was never found. Funny how that works. You wander into the back room of the saloon. It's darker here, cooler. There's a box of old flyers. Sheriff hosts poker night. The fastest gun in the West. Justice is a bullet away. All printed. All unsigned. All left to rot. He never needed anyone to praise him. He wrote the praise himself. But as you pull open a drawer beneath the flyers, your fingers graze something unexpected. A script, handwritten, titled, "3 Shots at High Noon, A Hero's Reckoning." It reads like a stage play. Carefully written dialogue, scene directions, even audience reactions scribbled in the margins. Crowd gasps. Saloon girl faints. Barrel explodes dramatically. It's dated a full week before the so-called gunfight. And now you know. It was all theater. A performance. A bloody play with only one man on stage and no one allowed to leave before the curtain fell. You step back out into the street and suddenly, the whole town feels like a set. The boarded windows, the exaggerated silence, the perfect placement of boot prints in the dirt, all curated. Like you've been walking through a diorama instead of history. Maybe the most terrifying truth isn't that he was a criminal pretending to be a sheriff. It's that he was an actor. And everyone played along. You glance at the clock tower. Its hands haven't moved in years. Stuck at 12:03, the supposed minute the last shot was fired in that mythical duel. People say the clock broke from the echo. Others say he stopped it himself. A metaphor, a joke, a punchline to a scene no one asked for. And you're standing in the encore. You suddenly remember something you read once. Legends are only dangerous when no one questions them. Here, no one ever did. You make your way toward the old jailhouse. Drawn by that familiar feeling, morbid curiosity. The kind that prickles your neck and whispers, "Don't look too long, or too close." The door swings open easier than it should. Inside, the air is thick with mildew and memories. Iron bars coated in rust line both sides of the corridor. And somewhere deep in the stone, water drips with a steady tick, tick, tick. You imagine it was meant to echo footsteps. But there's no one here now. At least, no one alive. The cells themselves are oddly pristine, beds still made, blankets tucked like military corners. A bootlace here, a playing card there, but no signs of struggle. And no names scratched into the walls. That's what gets you. Prisoners always leave marks. Always. But not here. Not under his watch. You peer into the corner cell, the one they used for the special guests. The door's reinforced with double bolts. There's a charred ring in the center of the floor. Town legend says he once locked a woman in there who refused to confess. Not to a crime, just refused to confess anything. The story ends with a whisper. She sang in the dark. Until she stopped. What did she confess to? Doesn't matter. The sheriff decided she needed to. Historians still argue whether that jail ever operated under any official jurisdiction. Technically, the county judge operated out of another town. But somehow, every time that judge tried to visit, his horse would throw a shoe. Or the bridge would wash out. Or he'd receive an anonymous telegram warning him to stay put. Funny how fate keeps its distance when a man like that writes the rules. You walk along the cells and realize something. This jail wasn't built for criminals. It was built for problems. People who asked questions. People who disobeyed. People who remembered too much. One quirky detail you spot, etched faintly into the iron of cell 4. Near the hinge. Truth isn't law. It's been partially filed off. But someone tried to say it. At least once. There's a drawer in the sheriff's desk. Locked. You find the key still hanging from a leather loop on the wall. Inside, a bundle of old incident reports. None are signed. All typed. Crisp. Mechanical. Like someone wanted to preserve the illusion of professionalism. But the language? Cold. Detached. Subject relocated to holding. Mental state. Incooperative. Complaint withdrawn after reevaluation. Released into trust of local undertaker. Not released to family. Not transferred to court. To the undertaker. It hits you then. This wasn't a jail. It was a vault. A waiting room between being a person and being gone. You glance around. The bars. The low ceiling. The smell of old leather and ash. This place wasn't meant to rehabilitate. It was meant to erase. And the sheriff? He was the eraser. People say he had a system. That he used the jail as a final checkpoint. If you walked in, you walked out either changed, or not at all. The town grew quiet after each incident. Like everyone inhaled together and held it, waiting to see who'd be next. And the strangest part? It worked. Crime didn't disappear, it hid. Folks kept their vices underground. Poker moved to basements. Bootlegging shifted to barns. Gossip became nods and glances. No one dared speak against him. Because they'd end up in this place. And not for a night. For good. There's an old Bible on the desk. Warped from heat. Its spine cracked. Tucked inside is a single playing card, Queen of Spades, with something scratched into it. God judges. I sort the line. That line, it seems, was wherever he said it was. You return to the corridor and notice the cells aren't numbered. They're named. Small brass plaques above each door. The lawyer. The butcher. The stranger. The whisperer. You wonder if those were jobs, or offenses. And then you notice the sixth cell. No plaque. No bed. Just a rocking chair bolted to the center of the floor. Locals call it the listening room. No one knows what happened in there. Only that folks who entered it stopped talking afterward. Some forever. Some just long enough to pack their bags and never return. You sit in the chair. Just for a moment. And the silence changes. It's no longer quiet, it's full. Like the room's holding its breath. Like someone, or something, is waiting. You stand, heart hammering. The chair creaks behind you. But no one touched it. That's when you realize why this jail never held drunks, pickpockets, or common thugs. It only held those close enough to know. The ones he couldn't bribe. The ones he didn't trust to forget. The ones who might still tell someone. This jail was where secrets went to die. And in a town where the sheriff made the truth, there was no higher crime than remembering the real version. You step outside and blink at the sunlight like a prisoner yourself. Because for a second there, you almost believed he was right. And that's the most dangerous part of all. You find yourself drawn toward the old chapel at the edge of town, the one with no congregation. No bell, and no cross on the steeple anymore. The door creaks open with a reluctant moan, revealing a narrow aisle flanked by rotting pews and dust-choked windows that filter the sun into pale gray shafts. It smells like old paper, dried sweat, and a lie that's been sitting too long. This was never just a church. It was also a courthouse, a town hall, a morgue, when it had to be. And for a time, it was the sheriff's office annex. That was during what folks call the quiet period, a span of 18 months when he stopped patrolling, stopped jailing, and stopped shooting. But he didn't stop working. He simply moved here, into the sanctuary. Every Sunday, people would show up thinking they were getting salvation. What they got instead was notarized guilt and a 2-part sermon on why mercy isn't efficient. Behind the pulpit, you find a blackboard. The chalk's still there, half broken, edges blunted. Written in faded hand are 5 words. Obedience is cheaper than justice. That wasn't scripture. That was policy. You notice something odd. The altar has been shifted. You push it aside and discover a trapdoor beneath, hinges rusted, but not sealed. Below, a stairwell descends into a darkness that feels heavier than it should. Like the air itself is older down there. You descend, one step at a time. Dust clings to your boots. The walls grow colder, damp with the kind of moisture that doesn't belong in a desert. And at the bottom, a room, simple, quiet, stone table, 3 chairs, 1 lantern, long burned out. This is where he did business. Historians still argue whether these meetings were real or exaggerated, claims of late-night contracts, whispered threats, even forced baptisms into his version of law. But too many old-timers recall this room, the poker sanctuary. They called it, not because they played cards, but because they gambled their lives. You spot a ledger tucked in the corner, beneath an oilskin wrap. It's thin, almost empty, but each page is a transaction. Land deed 40 acres, signed under duress. Whiskey license, revoked, resold. Marriage annulment, no parties present. He wasn't just judge and jury. He was notary, accountant, and executioner. And he did it with a pen. You'd always heard he was a fast draw. Turns out, his fastest weapon was paperwork. One quirky fact from a surviving deputy's journal. He learned how to forge 7 different handwriting styles, including the town mayor's. That deputy died in a stampede inside a barber shop. No horses, just blood and silence. You scan the room again and notice a cross carved into the wall, then immediately struck out with a second carving, an X. Beneath it, scratched in smaller letters, forgiveness is weakness. So he rewrote the rules. Even God's. Back upstairs, you glance toward the confessional booth. The curtain is closed. You don't want to look inside. But of course, you do. And what you find chills you. A drawer of personal items. Lockets, rings, a badge that's been broken in half and resealed with wire. These were payments, tokens, offerings. No prayers were said here. Just terms accepted. You step outside again, into the bright sun, and realize you're standing on hallowed ground that's been unhallowed by bureaucracy. And the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. In a land with no order, justice becomes a business. And the sheriff? He was the only one charging interest. There's a story about a land dispute between 2 brothers. Couldn't settle it in court. The judge was gone. Couldn't settle it with fists. One had lost an arm in a mining accident. So they went to him. He listened, nodded, asked for a small donation to the peace fund. The next day, one brother had a deed, and the other had a funeral. Problem solved. People still whisper about the peace fund. No record of where the money went. No structure. Just a locked strongbox in the sheriff's closet that no one dared open. Some say it contained nothing. Others say it held the town's most damning secrets, signed confessions, forbidden birth records, even a bounty list on names that haven't aged a day in over a century. The point wasn't whether it was real. The point was that everyone believed it was. And when belief becomes currency, the man who prints the myth controls the bank. You make your way toward the old church steps and pause. There's a burn mark on the final stair, shaped like a boot heel. Just one, facing outward. They say that was where he made his final speech. Not to the crowd, to himself. No one heard the words, only the echo. But for days after, the town felt lighter, as if something had left. Not him, though, not yet, because before he vanished, he had one last hustle. And you're about to find out what it was. The story goes that one crisp autumn morning, the sheriff stood outside the mayor's house, hat tipped, one hand resting lazily on the butt of his revolver, the other holding a folded letter. He knocked once, no answer. Knocked twice, still nothing. Then he kicked the door in and dragged the mayor out by the collar, still in his nightshirt. Barefoot, confused, sputtering like a kettle. Witnesses say he didn't shout, didn't curse, just said 7 words that would echo through the town for years. I am the correction to your ambition. He marched the mayor straight down Main Street, past the bakery, the post office, the schoolhouse, and then, to the gallows. Not the courtroom, not the jail, the gallows. You freeze as you hear the tale recounted by an old woman sweeping her porch. She doesn't look up, doesn't stop brushing. She's told the story so many times her voice barely moves with it. But you catch the phrase she repeats like a ritual. No trial, no preacher, just a verdict. The mayor's crime? He'd won a lucrative mining contract from a rival town. One that would have given Mercy Creek autonomy, reduced the sheriff's power, introduced regional oversight, maybe even brought a federal marshal to review the books. And that was enough. The sheriff nailed the contract to the back of the gallows post. Let it hang there for a week. Then burned it. No copies. No claim. The land deal died with the mayor. Historians still argue whether the hanging was technically legal. Some say the sheriff invoked an old territorial statute. Others say he made the statute up, then paid someone to forge it into the town records. Either way, no one stopped him, because everyone knew, if the sheriff wanted you guilty, all he had to do was look at you sideways. The gallows still stand. No one's dared take them down. The wood is warped, rope long gone, but the outline of the mayor's boots is still visible in the dirt. Every few years, weeds grow there. They never last long. You step closer. At the base of the beam, carved faintly in the grain, power is its own permission. It's not signed. It doesn't need to be. You move past the square, deeper into the outskirts of town. There, nestled between the dry hills and the bones of forgotten cattle, stands a house. The mayor's old place, shuttered, crumbling, but something about it hums. You enter through the side door, less a door now, more a collection of warped boards held together by memory. Inside, everything is frozen in time. A pot still on the stove, a glass half full, the chair he never sat in again. On the desk, buried under old contracts and ink-stained envelopes, lies a single bullet, wrapped in a torn piece of hymnal paper, like some warped relic from a saint with blood-stained hands. Scrawled beside it, he judges in whispers. You pocket the note, not out of theft, but preservation. Because you know, deep down, no museum would dare display it. This story isn't fit for tour guides. It's too raw, too true. And the sheriff? He never denied it. When asked about the hanging by the one reporter brave, or stupid, enough to inquire, He replied, "The rope don't lie, and neither do I." That reporter left town the next day. Left his typewriter behind. One quirky fact? The sheriff had the gallows measured weekly. Not for structural soundness, just to make sure they stayed ready. He claimed it was part of civil preparedness. But everyone knew it was a reminder. Like the way he walked past it every morning, casually adjusting his belt, as if to say, "I could, anytime." You wander past the stagecoach station and notice the schedule hasn't been updated in years. But one line remains painted in faded ink. Next departure. After the reckoning. No one knows who wrote it. But maybe that's the point. Because what he did to the mayor wasn't an execution, it was a demonstration. A billboard made of bone and fear. A clear message to the entire town. Even your highest office means nothing if I say it does. And what came next? Well, silence. No elections. No committees. No more meetings in the town hall. The building sat unused for years. People stopped organizing. Stopped petitioning. If you wanted something done, you went straight to him. And paid the toll. Because his justice wasn't blind. It was calculated. And if you couldn't pay in gold, you paid in obedience. You find yourself near the edge of a canyon, dry, jagged, and so deep it looks like it could swallow secrets whole. The locals call it Whisper Drop. No railings, no markers, just dust, wind, and stories that never quite settle. And right at the rim? A flat, smooth rock with a chip in its center. Like a bullet struck but didn't shatter it. Or maybe it did, just not visibly. This is where the trial never happened. The one with the witness who vanished. He was a prospector. They say, name lost to time. Or maybe scrubbed. He'd found something. Or heard something. Either way, he was supposed to testify against the sheriff. A real trial. With real people. Brought in from a neighboring county. A brave judge. A traveling prosecutor. Even a preacher to swear the man in. And yet, the night before, the witness jumped. No note. No reason. No signs of struggle. Historians still argue whether it was suicide, murder, or a carefully orchestrated vanishing act. The sheriff claimed the man was unwell. But townsfolk whisper a different tale. That the sheriff met him at the canyon. Sat beside him, and told a story so terrible. So persuasive. The man chose disappearing over remembering it. You look down. You can't see the bottom. Just heat mirages and birds that never land. Someone placed a horseshoe on the rim years ago. Bent, blackened, not from fire, just time. Some say it belonged to the witness's mule. Others say it never belonged to anyone. It's just part of the story now. The sheriff never faced another trial after that. Not because he was acquitted. Because no one dared try again. You wander back into town and past the old telegraph office. Inside, wires still hang limp from the ceiling. A message board covered in yellowing paper curls in the heat. One message remains tacked on the center pin. Postponed until evidence resurfaces. No date, no signature. Just that sentence. Like the past had hit pause. One quirky report from the time. The judge assigned to the case got lost on the way back. His coach overturned. Driver found wandering without memory. The judge? Never found. All that remained was his gavel. Lodged in a tree stump 40 miles south. And the sheriff? He returned to his office. Hung his coat. And added one more name to his ledger. Unnamed, but understood. You stop by the boarding house where the prosecutor had stayed. Room 3. Second floor. Still locked. Still untouched. The innkeeper, now blind with age, swears he hears someone pacing up there some nights. Slow steps. Back and forth. Never leaving. Never arriving. Could be wind. Could be rats. But then again, the floorboards never creak under rats. You stare at the key still hanging on the wall. It's marked with a symbol, not a number. A spiral. Scratched in with something sharp. A badge corner. Maybe. You pass by the school again. Now half sunk into the dirt. The children here are taught not to ask questions about the canyon. Not because it's dangerous, but because it reminds. of what happens when someone tries to speak. And yet, someone did speak. Once. A traveling priest, not from the territory, young, loud, naive, gave a sermon on truth. Said, "No man is above judgment." The sheriff sat in the front pew that day. Listened quietly. Nodded. Even applauded. Then walked the priest out of town the next morning. No one ever saw the priest again. But weeks later, pages of his Bible turned up along the canyon rim, fluttering like leaves no one could catch. You can't shake the sense that the sheriff didn't just silence people. He removed the evidence of their lives. Scrubbed it, like they were never meant to exist. A living redaction. And for a time, it worked. The town fell in line. No more witnesses. No more trials. Just quiet days and heavy nights. But the silence became its own evidence. Like the way the wind won't blow through the sheriff's office. Or how birds refuse to land on the jailhouse roof. Nature knows. It remembers. One man tried again, years later. A surveyor for the rail company. Said he'd found inconsistencies in land ownership records. Even claimed the sheriff's deeds were forged. He sent letters to his supervisors. Collected maps. Kept notes. Then one day, he stood at the canyon's edge too. And vanished. All they found was his compass. Still pointing south. The canyon never gave back the witness. Never gave back the priest. Never gave back the surveyor. And never gave back the truth. But it kept their echoes. And maybe that's why the sheriff liked it. Because it swallowed secrets faster than he could make them. Even the Pinkertons came. You'd think that would have ended him. Professional detectives with badges. Warrants. And the weight of the federal government behind them. Men trained to hunt outlaws and corrupt officials. Men who had taken down entire gangs. Men who, frankly, didn't scare easily. But that was before they met him. The first agents arrived quiet. Disguised as traveling salesmen. One sold brushes. The other Bibles. They rented a room above the hardware store and set up an office out back. Behind crates of nails and horse tack. They watched. Took notes. Asked questions. Too many questions. 3 days later, one of them packed his bags and left. Just walked out at dawn. Left everything behind, coat, papers, even his boots. He didn't speak to anyone. Didn't look back. Just kept walking down the road until the horizon swallowed him whole. The other one? Stayed. For a while. Then, he stopped sending reports. When the Pinkertons sent a second team to investigate, they found the office empty. The crates undisturbed. The journals gone. And carved into the underside of the desk. In perfect block letters. There is no case. Only consequence. Historians still argue whether the sheriff bribed them, threatened them, or turned them into believers. But there's one undeniable fact. After that visit, the Pinkertons never came back. In fact, their records of the mission were sealed. Buried in bureaucratic limbo. If you ask for them today, you'll receive a single typewritten page. Operation Null terminated. No further inquiry authorized. You sit in the abandoned general store and find a rolled-up poster behind the flour sacks. A sketch of a man, hard jaw, wide-brimmed hat, dark eyes. Across the top, wanted, sheriff, Mercy Creek, $2 reward, alive. Only problem? The signature is scribbled out. Torn, violently, like someone didn't want it known who ordered it. One quirky town tale says that one Pinkerton agent stayed behind, as his deputy. Not confirmed, not denied, just believed. You check the back of the photo again. Someone's written in pencil. All roads lead to his office. So you go. Back to that office. Door closed this time, but the smell still seeps through the wood, oil, dust, gunpowder, and something sweeter. Like dried flowers. Or decay in disguise. You step inside. The desk is untouched. Chair turned ever so slightly to face the window. A lamp sits cold and unlit. Yet the room feels watched. You run your hand over the top drawer. Locked. The key's always in the same place. Behind the portrait of the town hall. Wedged between frame and nail. Inside the drawer? A stack of envelopes. All blank. all sealed, heavy. You tear one open. Inside, a badge, but not his. These are from other sheriffs, from other towns, with a single sheet of paper in each envelope. Reading only. Not fit. You understand now. He'd outlasted them all. Sheriffs came, tried to make changes, tried to impose rules, tried to undo him. And when they failed, when they broke under the pressure of his legacy or the fear he'd instilled, they mailed him their badges. Not to surrender. To acknowledge him. The lawman beyond law. There's one envelope different from the others, stained with what looks like rust or dried blood. You open it, expecting another badge, but it's a mirror. Cracked, small, just enough to see one eye. And on the back, written in his handwriting, "You're him now. If you're holding this, you drop it." Not out of fear, out of understanding. Because the Pinkertons didn't fail because they couldn't arrest him. They failed because they started to agree with him. One of their journals, hidden beneath the floorboards, barely legible, contains a line scribbled across 3 pages. He makes too much sense. And that's how you lose a town. Not with bullets. With logic. Cruel, cold, surgical logic. Crime was down. Business thrived. No outlaws. No lawlessness. Just one man. One man who made himself necessary. And once people accept necessity, they stop asking about morality. That's when the rot becomes the foundation. And in Mercy Creek, it's the only thing keeping the walls from falling in. They say fire claimed the old deputy barracks. But the stories that came after burned hotter. It happened late one night. No moon in the sky. Just the dry rattle of mesquite leaves and the occasional howl that sounded too human. Locals woke to see orange dancing in the horizon. Flames licking the heavens. A tower of black smoke straight out of Revelation. By morning, the barracks were gone. All 6 deputies, gone too. No bodies. No bones. No sign of struggle. Just ashes. And an odd smell. Like copper and sage. The official record? Accidental fire. 'Cause unknown. But folks remember what came before. The arguments. Whispers in the saloon that the deputies were turning. That they'd found something in the sheriff's ledgers. A plan to retire them. Replace them. Or worse, outlive them. One deputy, name lost, but remembered as Duke, had reportedly drawn his pistol on the sheriff in the jail hallway the day before the fire. It never went off. They say he looked down and found the cylinder was empty. Every chamber, even though he swore it was loaded that morning. No one ever saw Duke again. And the other deputies? Ghosts now. No graves. No markers. Just a patch of scorched earth behind the saloon where grass never grew again. You walk the site. The air is cooler here. Still. Not dead. Exactly, expectant. Like something's watching. Waiting to finish a conversation it started a long time ago. Then you see them. Boot prints. 6 of them. Fresh. Deep. Heading away from the barracks toward the old church, but no prints leading to the spot. Locals call them the ghost deputies. Say they ride through town on moonless nights. Spurs silent, eyes glowing faintly, looking for the man who made them what they are, then vanished before they could ask him why. One quirky superstition? Townsfolk leave coins on their windowsills on the anniversary of the fire. Not for luck, for protection, a bribe, in case the deputies stop by and ask if you ever served him. If you ever helped. If you ever agreed. Even children know the ritual. But the strangest part? The sheriff never replaced them. Not once. He wore all 6 stars on a sash he fashioned from a broken bridle. No new deputies. No partners. Just him, and 6 empty chairs at the town meetings. He didn't explain. Didn't have to. The message was clear. They failed me. And failure wasn't tolerated. Historians still argue whether the deputies turned on him because of conscience or competition. Some claim they tried to form a council. Others say they were planning to bring in federal oversight. But whatever they found, whatever they planned, it ended in smoke and silence. You visit the old records room next to the courthouse. Mostly water-damaged papers, moldy books, Things left behind when belief turned to fear. But one file remains crisp, preserved in oilcloth, titled, Deputy Reassignments, Denied, signed by the sheriff himself. No reason given, just a red stamp, not applicable. You flip to the last page and find a chilling note handwritten in the margins. If they speak, they unravel me. If they vanish, I remain. You close the file. Outside, you glance toward the far hill, where a silhouette stands, too still, too broad. You blink. It's gone. Maybe it was a tree. Maybe not. They say the deputies never stopped serving, just changed employers. Some believe they're bound to the town, that the gallows tied them here, that each knot in the rope sealed their silence and their servitude. Others believe they weren't destroyed at all, just absorbed, that the sheriff took their duties, their souls, their faces. And that's why sometimes, when folks look at old photographs of him, the shape of his features seems to change. Wider jaw, crooked nose, a scar that wasn't there last time. Because the sheriff wasn't one man. He was 6, or maybe more. Or maybe he just carried their shadows with him, as proof that betrayal didn't go unanswered. Either way, no one filled their shoes. Because their boots still walk. You stop at the county line. The wooden sign welcoming travelers to Mercy Creek is weathered. The letters chipped and faded, like the town itself is trying to forget its name. But nailed to the back of the sign, facing away from the road, where only someone leaving would see it, is something stranger. A wanted poster. Crisp, untouched by sun or rain. Almost new. And the name? His. Sheriff of Mercy Creek. Same sketch. Same cold eyes. Except this time, the details say something different. Wanted in 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. Multiple counts. Fraud. Extortion. Disappearance of federal agents. Impersonation of government officials. But here's the catch, he's still the sheriff. Here, you feel the contradiction like a crack in the air. Outside Mercy Creek, he's a criminal. Inside, he's the law. How? You wander back toward town, your boots dragging dust like tired thoughts. The sun's higher now, casting long, sharp shadows, especially from the sheriff's office, whose silhouette stretches across Main Street like a warning you can't unsee. You duck into the old records vault beneath the town hall, half buried. Humid, lined with ledgers no one touches anymore. And there, between stacks of unpaid taxes and water rights disputes, you find a bundle of letters stamped, confidential, do not file. They're from governors, judges, even a senator. Each one addresses the same thing, the sheriff's actions, his methods, and the mounting pressure to remove him. But each ends with the same phrase. Handwritten in hurried ink, too useful to lose. That's it. That's the truth you didn't want to believe. Outside towns, he was a threat. Inside towns, he was a solution. To crime, to chaos, to the illusion of order. Historians still argue whether he brokered secret deals with local officials or simply became too entrenched to remove. But the result was the same. He could be wanted in 3 states, and welcomed in 1. One quirky telegram you find, dated 7 years after his appointment. We've reviewed all claims. Recommend non-interference. Let the sheriff burn himself out. Spoiler. He never did. Because fire doesn't burn itself. It spreads. You pass by the post office, now a dry husk of a building. All brittle timber and tired ghosts. A corkboard inside still holds faded envelopes. One catches your eye. It's addressed to, Office of the President, Washington, D.C., never sent. You peel it open. Read the first line. He is not a man. He is a border. And suddenly, everything clicks. He was the line. The blurry space between criminal and enforcer. Between outlaw and savior. Between justice and just enough. You step back outside and the town looks different. Every building, every face, every footstep, it all exists under his allowance. They live because he lets them, not because the law says so. And those 3 states? They issued warrants, yes, but never crossed the line. because no one wanted to see what would happen if they did. You find the train tracks just beyond town. Abandoned, half swallowed by sagebrush and time. That train was supposed to bring law here. A circuit judge, a new sheriff, a future. It derailed in '87. Cause unknown. No casualties, because it never had passengers. Only paperwork, legal challenges, court records, subpoenas. Gone. Ashes blew into Mercy Creek the next morning. Folks said it smelled like old leather and whiskey. You glance up the hill and see the flagpole. Still standing. No flag. Just rope that occasionally moves when there's no wind. And you know, he's still sheriff here. Because the badge is less about metal, and more about memory. And this town remembers his version of events. No matter what the rest of the world says. So yes, he's wanted in 3 states. But Mercy Creek? Mercy Creek still sets a chair for him at council meetings. Still leaves a shot glass out on the bar. Still nods when someone mentions his name in passing. Because until someone replaces him, he is the law. The door was open. That's what they found. Not kicked in, not splintered, just open, like he stepped out for air and never came back. The sheriff's office sat quiet that morning. Dust in the air, lamp still warm, a cup of coffee half drunk on the windowsill. His chair pushed back just enough to suggest he stood up quickly. Or deliberately, or maybe not at all. They waited, of course. An hour, then 2, then all day. He didn't return. You stand in that office now, running your fingers across the smooth divot his elbow carved into the desk over years of leaning. You feel it in your bones. The absence is too loud. Too intentional. Then someone noticed the watch. Not missing, ticking. A gold pocket watch, left open on the desk. But the face, cracked. And the second hand doesn't sweep. It jerks, like something is trying to move it from the other side. It was 7:13 when he left. But no one knows what day. Because he didn't leave. He vanished. No horse missing. No dust trail. No luggage taken. Just the man. Gone. Some say he rode out into the hills and staged his own death. Others claim a rival gang finally caught up with him and buried the body where even God wouldn't find it. But there's one detail that keeps clawing at you. The blood. A thick smear on the back wall. Hidden behind the law books. Dried. Deep. But not his. How do they know? Because when they tested it years later, it didn't match any human profile on record. Historians still argue whether he was ever human at all. You walk down to the riverbed. Long dry. At its center stands a tree. Ancient and twisted. Its bark blackened by fire. But its roots still reach wide. Locals call it the farewell tree. They say he stood beneath it that night. Alone. Coat pressed. Hat low. Said nothing. Just waited. For what? Maybe a horse. Maybe a messenger. Maybe a reckoning. You step closer and find carvings in the bark. Not initials. Numbers. Dates. Names. Locations. Each one corresponding to people who disappeared under his reign. Each one carved with a clean, deliberate hand. And the last line? All debts settled. Let the silence grow. You press your palm against it. It's warm. Too warm. There's a theory, circulating among ghost towns and bounty hunters, that he didn't vanish. He transferred. Passed the badge to someone else. Or maybe just the idea of it. That's the terrifying part. He didn't need a body anymore. Just a symbol. A whisper. A nod from across a saloon. You walk back into town. Everyone's too quiet. Too still. Eyes darting like they expect him to walk around the corner at any second. Because sometimes, he does. One quirky story from a traveling merchant. He claimed he met a sheriff with no name in a town that wasn't on any map. Said the man wore a badge that didn't reflect light. Spoke in riddles. And handed out justice with a smile and a coin toss. The merchant asked his name. The sheriff replied, "I've had many." And then vanished. The coin? Still in the merchant's pocket. Warm, even on cold nights. You pass the jail one last time and see the doors slightly ajar. Inside. Boots by the cot. A coat on the peg. A single revolver on the desk. And the badge. But not the same one. This one is older, rougher, burnt at the edges. You don't remember walking in. But you're here now. And that watch? Still ticking. Still waiting. Because maybe he didn't vanish. Maybe he shed. And someone, you, perhaps, just picked up where he left off. Because legends don't die. They just change names. And wear new boots. They say you don't find the badge, it finds you. Maybe you just wandered into town, looking for water. Or maybe you were chasing a rumor. But here you are now. Sitting in his chair. The sun is starting to fall behind the hills, casting gold across the floorboards. You should feel warm. You don't. The air shifts, heavy with memory. Not yours, his. The badge sits in front of you on the desk, casting a warped shadow in the slanting light. You haven't touched it, but you've thought about it. Everyone does. It's just a little piece of metal. Scratched, dented, its star points dulled by time and something harder than rust. But you'd swear it hums when no one's looking. The townsfolk pass by the office and pretend not to glance in. They know. They always know. That chair you're in? It's not just wood and leather. It's inheritance. And it changes you. Out of the corner of your eye. You notice the lamp is lit. You didn't light it. You swear you didn't. A name scroll hangs on the back wall. Most people think it's a memorial, past lawman. Buried and forgotten. But look closer. The names aren't crossed out. They fade, letter by letter. Like smoke dissipating in sunlight. And now, a new one appears at the bottom. Yours. No one wrote it. You didn't speak it. But it's there. You close your eyes and the town comes alive behind your eyelids. You see him walking. Slowly. Confident. Not because he's unafraid, but because everyone else is. His boots leave no dust. His eyes scan no horizon. He owns every moment before it happens. And now that weight is in your chest. They still tell stories of a new sheriff in town who doesn't speak much. Who knows things he shouldn't. Who walks like he's been walking for centuries. The children dare each other to knock on your door after dark. The preacher prays a little louder on Sundays. The bartender wipes the same glass over and over. Like he's hiding in the rhythm. Because they feel it too. That something isn't right. That something old is back. You find an old journal tucked beneath the floorboard. His journal. Or someone who thought they were him. Pages filled with looping script. Half-legible thoughts. One sentence appears over and over. Like a warning that eventually turns into a mantra. Wear the badge long enough. And it wears you. And now, as night slips in through the cracks in the wood, you understand. He was never one man. Never just a sheriff. He was a role, a weight, a pattern carved into the town's bones. And when the last one vanished, Mercy Creek didn't panic. It waited. Because it knew someone else would sit in that chair. Pick up the badge. Finish the story. It always ends the same. A figure in a wide-brimmed hat. Spurs that never ring twice. A revolver that never jams. A name people say only in passing. And a town that never quite forgets, or forgives. You reach for the badge. Not because you want to. Because you were always going to. The lamp glows softer now. Shadows stretch. Gentle and long. As the town settles into its nightly hush. No gunfire. No galloping hooves. Just the creak of wind through the eaves and the low murmur of the saloon piano, 3 keys. Never more. You sit quietly. Boots still dusty. Hat brim low. The badge resting in your hand, cool. Solid. Strangely calm. Outside, the stars blink one by one into the sky. The wind shifts. A slow exhale brushing down from the hills. A coyote yips in the distance. Then silence. Peaceful. But not innocent. Because this town was never about good and evil. It was about balance. Held together by fear, pride, necessity, and someone willing to carry it all without flinching. You feel the weight now. Not just of the badge, but of all who wore it before. Their stories. Their lies. Their truths too heavy to speak aloud. You breathe in the dust. Let it settle behind your eyes. Out there, in the quiet beyond the ridge, Folks are still telling tales of a man who vanished without dying, of deputies who ride at night, of a lawman who was more outlaw than judge. And now, maybe, of you. So close your eyes. Let the hum of the lantern fade. Let the desk hold your elbow, just like it held his. Let the night remember your name. And maybe, just maybe, you'll sleep through till dawn.